So knowledge is changing radically, I think, from what it's been for 2,500 years, from being what is settled and agreed upon and unambiguous and orderly and unchanging, to becoming a network and taking on the properties of the network. So rather than looking for knowledge in particular containers which have been stamped by an authority, and in the past by very reliable authorities, nevertheless, knowledge now is showing up as in networks of discussion, argument, and disagreement, where it's unsettled, it's in debate, people are participating, authority no longer comes from simply having published, going through some filters, but rather comes from a variety of other marks that we are now beginning to figure out. It's becoming much larger because it's networked. It includes every piece of local knowledge that anybody knows, and is more open and available, although it means that the participants, us, have to spend more time and be more aware of our own role in deciding what is worthy of belief. Yes, it is a mess, but that's exactly how it should be. Because the alternative is that you set up a set of administrative bodies or academics or whatever in order to decide what is worthy of going on the web, and at that point the web gets very small. It excludes most people rather than involving them in the participation, and it suffers from the traditional problem of knowledge that we've had, which is that the people who make decisions about what's worthy of belief are highly trained and well motivated frequently, but are subject to the same sorts of human biases that everybody else is. And so we've had 2,500 years of mainly dead white men deciding what is worthy of belief and study, what matters. And the opinions of dead white men are very important, but they're not the only opinions we need. So if you want to let knowledge get really big, way bigger than we ever imagined, and you want it to involve more people and at more levels of detail, then you have to let it get messy. That's the price we pay, but it's a pretty glorious mess. There's an example of the hidden price we used to pay. We took it for granted that in every edition of an encyclopedia, and in this case the Encyclopedia Britannica, which is undoubtedly was the greatest encyclopedia in English, in every edition, the article about the poet Oliver Goldsmith, in the 1911 edition when it first showed up, it was 6,000 words, and then in the next edition it got cut in half, again, until in the last edition it was 1,500 words, which means that Britannica threw out information about Oliver Goldsmith, not because they wanted to, but because they knew that their encyclopedia could be about 35 volumes, it couldn't be 1,000 volumes, because no library would buy it. And so they had to keep throwing information out. And that's just a shame. But we did it and we're used to it because that's, of course, when libraries get a new book in, usually they have to throw a book out. That's not because libraries are evil, it's because that's how physics works. We're used to that, but we no longer have to be used to that because we now have a medium that has unlimited capacity. So you can ask, the new type of knowledge is so different and so upsetting to our normal values. Our normal values of knowledge have to do with credentialed experts who make very good decisions and decide what is worthy and what isn't. And we have enormous institutions that are established to do that. And the new idea of knowledge pays very little attention to those institutions. And yet we have swarmed to this new idea of knowledge. In 15 years, the old institutions which we looked like they were eternal, are beginning to crumble. Libraries, we don't know what's going to happen to libraries or to newspapers or to encyclopedias. The music industry has already fallen apart. We don't know what's going to happen. So why these changes so quickly? I mean, yes, we have a new medium, but we have flocked to this new medium because this new idea of knowledge, this networking of knowledge, feels more human to us. It incorporates human characteristics that the old idea of knowledge pretended weren't there. The old idea pretended that it could be objective, that it could make decisions without having self-interest involved, and that's really not possible. Or they could see the world but not from any particular point of view, but rather as it is. And no, we now know that we have an environment where billions of people are showing us their world from their point of view simultaneously. The old knowledge was embarrassed by making mistakes. The new knowledge assumes it. We're very straightforward about it. We learn from it. Those characteristics are characteristics not just of knowledge, but of how we are as humans who are trying to know. And I think that's one reason why this new and sort of weird idea of knowledge really isn't weird at all. It's very, it's very much like home. It's Heimlich. It's familiar to us. Well, so businesses have assumed that they are the sole source of knowledge about their products and services, because until recently they were. Now that's changed in the past 20 years very rapidly, but it used to be that if you wanted to know about a car or a piece of real estate or whatever, your only source just about was the business, and they would tell you what they wanted you to know. Generally they wouldn't lie, but they would put the best face on it, and now businesses are not the best source. Frequently the last place that you go. If you want to know how a car will do in your city, or you go out to the web and you find other people who have the same needs as you. And you'll get a much better answer, more detailed, more local, and more honest than the car company could ever have given you. And so networked conversations, networked markets now have become the best source of knowledge about products and services offered by companies, not the companies themselves, which means that companies have lost their most important source of power over their markets. So in many realms, from libraries to newspapers to businesses, we made decisions about what information to keep. It was expensive often to get the information, it was expensive to keep it up, and we had very limited spaces to put them in. You know, the library, whether corporate library or public library, only has this much shelf space. It doesn't have that much. And so you'd have to make good decisions, and there are curators who are wonderful at what they do. I work in a library. I work with curators, and they're really good at what they do, given that limitation. When that limitation is removed, as it is in the digital world, it turns out that it's much more expensive, typically, to go through a huge body of whatever it is, of reviews or photos or blog posts, and decide which ones to include. It's much more expensive to do that than simply say, well, let's include it all. And by including it all, when you curate, you anticipate what your users are going to find useful. And a good curator does that well. If you can do it well, you can do it badly. Good curator does it well. When you include everything, everybody can be a curator. And so people who come to your collection, whatever it is, and have some peculiar personal need, and you literally cannot anticipate what people are going to be interested in, that person can find what they need in your collection. It's there. You didn't know it was going to be important, because you couldn't. But it turns out to be important. Well, who knows? I'll tell you what I would like to see happen. It is happening, and I hope it continues, but I don't know. A movement towards open access. Open access has a narrow definition around scholarly publishing, which I do mean, namely publishing online where anybody can read for free. Technically, open access means, and it goes through peer review, but I also mean it more broadly, so that we all get the sense, as our children are getting the sense, that they ought to be contributing to this public domain, making work reusable, not tying it up in copyright, making it reusable by other people so it has an effect, so other people learn from what we've learned, so that we can all engage together around this information that we're building. But to do that requires backing away from copyright, except when there's a good reason for it, and there are some, and having a sense that if I'm going to learn something, that's great, but it's better if I learn it in public so that the public sphere also learns it. So we're building a commons that anybody can participate in, and doing that consciously and completely, I think, is a really important thing.